Namaste, salam, peace. Today, I'd like to talk about the relationship between Advaita Vedanta and science. So, in the last video, we spoke about the relationship between modern critical theory and Advaita Vedanta. We kind of came to a point where we realized that we can actually Advaita Vedanta is an amazing, exceptionally good kind of resource, a philosophy, a window to understand problems in the modern world. It's not just like when Advaita Vedanta is not just like some theory expounded by Shankara and the other Vedantins, but then it's an experiential, lived experience. Like if you look at the life of Ramana Maharishi wasn't, he didn't read a book and then, come to an understanding of what the experience of being one with the absolute is. He experienced the nothingness of everything and only the reality of the self. And he kind of meditated on that reality. And many years later, when he read Vedanta, he realized that his experience matched that of Vedanta. It wasn't like so he didn't discover an experience from books. It's an experience. It's like a lived experience, and it's also as well as a theory of knowledge. So it's both like a very powerful philosophy, and it's also a powerful experience. So it's not like so it and so it runs very deep. So in this video, I want to discuss the relationship between Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, and science. So if you look at the problem today is that many people, like starting from as Radhakrishnan, he wanted to kind of prove to the West that Advaita Vedanta is also scientific, or it's rational in a certain sense. And like even many Hindus today, they would be like, oh, you know what, Vedanta is scientific, it's rational. But that's not what I'm but then I want to reverse the question. It's not like whether it's scientific, but then is science Vedantic? Because Vedanta does not deal with particles and gravity and like objects and stuff like that. It deals with absolutes. It deals with the absolute. What is the absolute behind all things? What is what is that which is truly real? Because when you look at objects around us, when you look at the world around us, you know uh, there's this kind of a negative theology that the Vedantins employ. Neti, not this, not that. That is not Brahman. That is not Brahman. The laws of physics are not Brahman. So it's like in the search of the absolute. It's like an ontological quest. It's not a material quest. So so in that process, the process of the Advaitins wanting to expound this knowledge of the absolute, they encounter the material world. And in encountering the material world, how did they react? Like what did they say about the material world? So it's like they, of course, we say the material world is Maya. Maya is not merely illusion, but then in relation to Brahman, Maya is illusion, because Brahman is that absolute. And in relation, there's nothing absolute like Brahman. So in relation to Brahman, you get the idea that the material world is Maya. And the material world, so it's like if the material world is Maya, then there should nothing be nothing absolute about the material world. There is no constant, you know thing, something that which is constant found in the material world. And that is what you know science today is dealing with Maya. So the scientists, in a sense, are like Buddhists. Buddhists didn't care about the existence of like gods, or they didn't even care about the the Brahman, the absolute, because they cared about how to get rid of suffering. The question that the Buddha raised was, I don't want to suffer. How can I stop myself from suffering? But the question that Shankara raises is, what is the absolute? What is that which is real behind the world of appearances? You know. So and so there is this kind of uh, epistemological difference between the Buddha and Shankara. So so it's similar to what science is. Doesn't care about that which is absolute. It cares about the observable universe and time and space. So it's like, so science is not in the realm of the ontological, so to say. So it's a science Advaitic. Is there a kind of a, yeah, in the sense that the Advaitin philosophers and Shankara and everybody else got the idea that on a radical relativity of the material world, then matter has no substance. So they were right, because the materialists, Carvacans, believe that the matter is all that there is. In the sense that if you want to find any absolute, it's in matter, but then matter does not have any absolute. And then, but then, there are people who argue in the finitude of matter, and in the infinite finitude of matter, and there's nothing beyond that. And even if there was something beyond that, it's like another world, and it's like, that's a different discussion altogether. So yeah, I would say that vedanta Vedantins believed what the modern scientists believed about matter. But the focus of modern science is to find a unified field theory to kind of reconcile, the theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity, with quantum mechanics. So it's like the quest is to understand in depth what Maya, in the world of Maya, all the forces around. And so scientists are like Buddhists in a certain sense. They're concerned about the Buddha was concerned about the elevation of suffering. The scientists are concerned about the way the material world works. So it's like, so what happens when we kind of focus on the question of whether Advaita is scientific? Then what happens is the scientific quest becomes, like, you switch the ontological quest of Shankara and the Advaitins, and the experience of Ramana Maharishi is ontological. It's at, like, it's at what really matters. It's at the heart of what really matters. And science does not hit at the heart of what really it looks for principles and laws and something abstract and impersonal in the world around us. It's about solving problems. Like, it can solve problems that humanity faces. Like, it can give you vaccines, but then it cannot give you bliss. So it's not, science cannot give you bliss. It can give you happiness, but it cannot give you bliss. So, like, so there is this kind of disconnect between what is absolute and what is scientific. So when we switch this, it's a very dangerous move, because what happens is, then we want to pursue science as that which matters the most, and then Advaita is a kind of a, it's kind of lost. The spirit and the depth and the wisdom and the knowledge of Advaita is secondary knowledge. But then the whole point is that Advaita is primary knowledge and primary experience and encounter with reality, whereas the other world, the scientific world, is like a derivation from, like, scientific world is a kind of a world of action, the world where action is performed in a certain sense, and we have to detach ourselves from that world. It's not to say that we don't want to become scientists, but then the whole point is that it's not an ontological activity. Although it's an essential activity in today's world, it's not ontological. So it's very important to make that distinction. So in the next video, I want to talk about uniting science and Advaita, but then that's like something I have to plow through. So it's like I have to work through that, and after I work through that, I will kind of talk about it. Thank you so much.